just a little review. I've got really the cylinders here to show you kind of the litany here. Here is a standard 50 millimeter 372 or 2171 Original Edition. You got the decomp on the side, not on the top. It's quite a bit shorter, like a ½ inch shorter than the X-torques that you see now. And right next to it I have, this is the X-torque, and I want you to look at the cross-sectional area of the transfers, where the X-torque is quite a bit smaller, which is one of the reasons why it likes to run at a little bit lower RPM, just simply because of the transfers, port timing, but the transfers are key. Okay? And we've gone through this before, but the flange on these are a little bit less. They don't go quite as deep as the flange on the X-torques, like about, I don't know. So you got to use the X-torque cylinder on the later cases that have a deeper relief on the cases. That ridge down there is deeper in on the X-torque cases than Original Edition. Covered that many times, but this is the standard bearer, and you can see from the wall thickness of the flange that is different than the 48 millimeter, which is quite a bit thicker, but also the 48 millimeter transfers are roughly the same cross-sectional area as these, which is why I like using the X-torque ignition system. Okay. Last but not least is the 51.4 millimeter cylinders. Notice where they filled in the transfers. Again, they're trying to bring the RPMs down, and it too has roughly the same cross-sectional area as the X-torques, so they also like to run in that same territory. And again, the comparison of the transfer ports to the standard 50 millimeter. So obviously the 50 millimeter version is going to want to run at a higher RPM. That's why the no load on these, which is really just a reference, is like 13.5, where the no load on the X-torques and these are down around 13,000 RPMs. That's not indicative of how they run in a cut as much as it is about tuning them, but the fact is they do like to run a little bit lower RPMs than the standard 50 millimeter with the bigger transfers, and that's really the biggest difference. Of course, the XPW has 51.4 millimeter bore. This one has a 50 millimeter bore. Put them away. Well, the mission of the day is to try to make some sense out of all this mess I have on the table. Clean up my table. And in order to do that, I have to at least partially assemble this saw, because really what's all over this table is all the bits and pieces for the saw. And for the most part I have what I need. I'm still missing a couple of things. So I guess we'll start with this. OEM seals. But I've been a little distracted. I'm wanting to get rid of some of my old motorcycles and stuff. And the thing is that I don't really need to get rid of them, but I kind of would like to get more space. So I put the thing on Facebook, old KTM, and got a couple of bites. And man, what a pain in the ass. It's one of those things where the more you do, the more they want you to do. And for what I'm asking for the motorcycle and how unique they were in their time, I'm kind of the mindset, if you want the stuff, just come and get it, figure it out. But don't make me jump through hoops and spend time I don't have, on a wild goose chase. Kind of forgot that whole cycle, So I just got to a point where I said, screw it. I'll just throw it on. There's my seal. This makes it quite a bit easier because I have it tapered where it only can go down so far, and I set the depth to where it sets that seal like halfway in between the bearing surface on the, or the sealing surface on the cases, and it's worked great for me. So I'll do the other side. Same deal, lots of oil. Now this side here, you got to be a little bit more careful, and really it's because there isn't a lot of wall thickness. So it's pretty easy to hit on that too hard and actually damage the very thin aluminum wall there. So, you know, I just stick it in gentle like that. And like right there is like really thin. So you really got to be gentle with that thing. Seals are in. A lot of seal tension now, right? But that's good. And again, what I've done there is I've recessed it, I don't know, 15 thousandths. It gives me a perfect seat. Because the way the casting is right here where the cutout is for the oil pump worm gear, that drops below that actual surface by about 15 thousandths. So my tool sets it where the edge of the seal is right at that same level on the casting. Guess I could put the flywheel on, right? Now I like to set these at 26 foot-pounds. That you really want to have the flywheel nut and a washer. You know, this kind of stuff may nickel and dime you, but details like this actually make a difference. So there actually is a part number. It's 503-230-101, and that's simply the washer. And it's got the right diameter, so it fits in there pretty snug. And then of course you have the flywheel nut. It's 13 millimeter or ½ inch, and I would prefer, if I could, to get these set at 26 foot-pounds, 30 something for the little steel 10 millimeter, but 26 for the Huskies. I'm using this from Harbor Freight, and you know, I usually start it down around 20 and I creep into 26 with it because I don't trust it, and I don't know if that just gives me sort of like security. And how you hold this, I don't suggest you do what I do. I really don't. For 26. Okay, 26 foot-pounds. And I'm also going to make sure it doesn't hit the cylinder when I put the cylinder on there. It's the kind of stuff that will happen if you over torque them. Nope, no interference. Check stuff like that. You know, We'll have to find one of these grommets. I got one on this 390 case. In my mind, right next is getting the handle on. I try to get the handle on pretty much as soon as I can. And the thing that's in between me and a successful handle installation right now is a wire, one wire. You have to find a rubber tube for that. I'll probably just cut a fuel line. Thanks to my boat repair operations, I've got just the hose. Yep. So let me just take a chunk of this off. Stick that on there. And now I've got a buffer for the handle. See that chamfer right there? I've made a big deal on this on the aftermarket handles that some of them don't have that. That make this operation a bit more of a pain in the neck than it has to be. I think actually before I do that, let me get rid of this fuel line. Let me put a new fuel line in here. Well, it doesn't look bad, it's just I don't like. I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. So, and this falls into the category of ridiculousness, but I always put that black wire on the bottom and the blue wire on the top, because the black wire is going to run right into that spring. Now I understand that there's no real way for it to get to grounding out through this spring, but I just do it anyway because. And then there's a little screw that holds that ground wire in. Continuing on, here's that little air injection nozzle thing. Got to get that in there. These are the right length right here. Now to set the air gap between the flywheel and the ignition, if you don't have one of these slick little tools, it's a steel shop tool. It's one of the few shop tools they sell that I like. 2mm, approximately 10 thousandths. Works just fine, so I'll use this one. But basically what you got to do is get these screws in kind of loose, you know. Get that kind of loose, and you'll see that's the counterweight side, that's the magnet side. See how it pulls it right in? Well, the best way to do it is to get this 10 thousandths gauge in there first and then turn the flywheel. See how I've got that shim right down in there between the flywheel and the ignition, and just turn that flywheel in. Like that. Now you've got this 10 thousandths shim in between the flywheel and the ignition, and tighten down the ignition. And again, you don't want to go crazy tight. There's no sense in stripping them out, you know. Once you got those tight, then back that flywheel right out, pull out your shim, and make sure that you have no interference. Right there, you'll see one there and one there. So push it down as far as you can with your finger, I guess. And that pushes the wire back in under the plate. Then go back through and push those right down inside. Make sure that Well, I managed to erase all the work I did on this side, which consisted of putting on the oil pump. And I wanted to make a couple of points when I was doing that, and basically ruined my opportunity to do so. You start with one of these, and you slide that over the crankshaft, which is exposed. And then you chase that down with one of these. So that little O-ring goes first, and that O-ring seals the intersection of this and the bearing, so that goes down next. Kind of turn that to get it into the seal. So after this sleeve pushes the little O-ring up against the bearing, you slide one of these washers over that sleeve, and the larger diameter part of that sleeve is what seals with the bearing, and this washer slip fits over here and keeps the worm gear from eating into the seal or eating into the bearing. After the little O-ring sleeve washer, then you put in the oil pump. And the point I was making with the oil pump is there's special length screws, so they don't go too far into the case. And I always put a little bit of 1194 on those two screws before I put them in. Of course, you have to remember to put the oil line in before you put the oil pump on. This would be the oil line. And that little bushing, this one here, which is one I had pointed out in the first video, the copper tube, I put the assembly together with the oil pump, and then I set the whole thing in, put those two screws in and tighten them up. And after the oil pump is in, the worm gear goes down. I made a point, I like this style. There's two styles of worm gear. There's one where there's like a tab either side, and then there's these. These are much, much, much better. So I've got it in other videos. People can go back and look if they want. So while I'm on this side, I might as well go and get the chain brake on, because that can be a pain in the neck for some. And with the chain brake, you start with a little plastic guard, if I can find it. And this really keeps the spring from eating into the magnesium, because the spring is pretty hard. There, snaps right in. Now you gotta set the spring in there, make sure they have that little pin. And also make sure this goes down. There's like a little step to the bottom, and it has to go all the way down to those steps. Leave that open for now, right? And then this guy here is going to need a fair amount of grease. Do not get one that's worn. Whatever you do, do not get one of these things that have a lot of wear on it, because that is going to create you problems. And this is where it gets a little goofy. There's a couple of things here that get a little goofy. One is you do got to get some grease on this stuff. So I'm going to get some more grease. Two, let me see if I can find a better one of these. This one here, it's got a little bit more wear than I like. Let me find a better one of those if I can. You know, I'm going to rob some more from this hapless 390. Seeing as it's the same stuff as a 372. Right? Of course, the front part of the case is very much the same as a 372, right? But the back part houses a larger cylinder, so it's a little bit different. And the 372 has a separate bearing seal arrangement, where the 390 has that integral bearing and seal like you see right there. And this is a 6303, where the 372 Original Edition and X-torques are 6202s. So that's a heavier bearing. And as a note, this heavier sized bearing has found its way into the 572s. One of the reasons why people are excited about them. I need that. I also need that little screw. But notice all these parts, including the part numbers, are the same between 390 and 372. Goes right in that time. Now, this is where people get a little goofy. I sort of have my own technique for putting in that spring. And then once you have that spring in there, you pretty much have to get that cover on pretty darn quick. That's what I do. I use this thing. Once you have that in there, like I said, get this darn thing on quick. It's in there, crank it by hand. Don't trust a darn impact driver, it's always too tight. I found an old 371 clutch drum with the holes in it. I think it's cool.
Should have grabbed the garbage bags over there. Were they perfect?
So I mentioned that using the X-torq carburetor, while I do it to do as I say, not as I do kind of a scenario, really not the best idea. I do it for a variety of reasons and it really doesn't matter for the purposes of this video. I'm going to recommend against doing it because there's a few things you have to sort of engineer in order to make it work, and that may compromise some other things in the saw. But for one, you have to cut up a perfectly good intake boot because the screws on the X-torq carburetor are at an angle as compared to just directly parallel to the base of the carburetor. So you have to rotate the intake boot and bracket assembly in order to get the filter holder to line up properly. So now you have a carburetor that's rotated out of its natural position. Now another thing is you'll see that angle is changed on the boot because it wasn't designed to be rotated that way. It was designed to have a slight angle straight up. So now you're always going to have a little bit of flex on that boot. So like I said, it may not be the best idea. It's something I happen to do, for a variety of reasons why. And the other thing is I don't have the short version of this filter holder for this purpose of this video, and I just want to get it running. So I'm going to have to use a different top cover. See if I have one where I can put a high top air filter on it for a little period of time. And then what I have to do is order the Jonsered version of this filter holder that doesn't have that boss to put in a screw. It has little things on the side to clip on the low top style of air filters. So this is what I got right now, you know, and so I'm just going to stick it on the saw, fire it up just so I can get something to show on the video. Always plug those. Got a new spark plug. They're cheap, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, I probably ought to put this one in. Well, I've got a new one. And it's quite a bit shorter. I don't know if it's supposed to be, but I'd say for sake of argument, let's just put the new one on. See if it restarts. Been idling for about 15 or 20 minutes. And I didn't have the Jonsered chain brake lever for inside there, so I had to put a Husqvarna handle on it, even though I have the Jonsered handlebar, because that's different on a Husky. And I didn't really have the right filter holder as well. I need the low top filter holder for the X-torques. So I just put that on for now, this cover on for now, same with this. When I get that filter holder, I'll take that apart and put on the right filter holder so I can put an actual air filter. And then I can start putting on the Jonsered cover. But anyway, let's see if it restarts. Now let's see if it restarts after that, sucking all that dust. Alright, I will get the right parts and finish off that saw, because I think it's going to run really strong. Talk to you later. Bye for now. I'll have it complete in the next video or two. Alright, so I let this thing idle for probably 15-20 minutes. It did not load up, and I shut it off and it fired right off after that. So that's a good start. And I also, so I've got a tractor coming up. Oh, Sean. I also took a couple of test cuts with it. But one of the things I want to kind of kick around a little bit, because we make a lot of noise about break-in. And so let's start now and take a timestamp of what its compression is. I can tell it's going to be a leaker. You know, right now, before it has any break-in time. It's only sitting around 140, which isn't a whole lot. You know, and that's with a base gasket delete. I would like to see this saw up in the 165, 170 range after it's broke in. But with 140 pounds of compression, that simply is not going to run a whole lot more than a stock 365. So you would think, right? So we'll see how this develops and how it breaks in. But right now I'm kind of underwhelmed with that compression ratio. I mean, that's enough to get it running. And it'll run pretty good, but it's no hot rod. Now, of course, this meter I have reads low, you know, which is another factor in all this. It reads about 5 pounds low, is what I've found. Is what I've found. So we will see. We will see if this develops into a higher compression ratio saw and runs better and better and better like some do, or is it going to be a dog? Well, it's actually not a dog. It already likes to rev. That's a given. But my guess is it's going to be a nice running saw, but it's not going to be an earth-shattering build. So let's see if it restarts.